Hi, I'm Om. Today we are gonna build a serverless application using React and AWS. First of all, I didn't figure out like how our application is gonna work. Uh, we will do everything right here only. So what I want to tell you is the application will look something like this. This will be our end user. After that, we are using API Gateway. After that, we will use Lambda function, and then finally we are using DynamoDB to store our data. So let's first user side or client side. Let's write this as client side. Okay. After that, this is our API gateway. This is our Lambda function. We are gonna write this function in Node.js. So let's write Node.js here. And finally we are having DynamoDB to store our data. So how the flow of our application will looks like. So from the client side, the request will go to the API gateway, then API gateway will handle that request and it will send that request to Lambda function, right? After the Lambda function got triggered, what Lambda function will do is it will send this request to DynamoDB and DynamoDB will store the data in this database. Now finally what we want to populate this data from DynamoDB to the client side, right? So the response will be given by DynamoDB to Lambda function, and Lambda function will send that response again to API gateway, and from API gateway the response will be sent to the client side, and finally at the client side here we'll get our data on our um, front end, right? So basically we are writing our front end in React.js, and all this part will keep this on our AWS infrastructure, right? So let's get directly into the code. I didn't figure out that how we are gonna write our code, but I know that we are gonna use material UI to create our table. So what our application will looks like, I'll tell you how our application will look like. So it will basically a box. After that, we will create a table head. We'll create a table head. In this table head, we'll create some field like ID. Let's create it. We need ID. We will store name. We will store age. We will store phone number. We will store email. Right. So we are gonna store all this in our head, right? And let's say we have data here. For example, id is 1 id is 1. Oh, sorry. Right, id is 1, name is Om, age is 21, phone number is something like this, and email is at gmail.com, right? So we want to build something like this, and at the end we want a remove button, so that if we clicked on this button if we click on this button, this entry should remove from here. If we click on this remove button, this entry should pop up from this table. So let's get into it. Let's write the code. Let's use material UI. So first of all, what we want to do is just open your terminal and create a React app. So to create a React app, you just simply have to write the command npx create a React app and give the name of your app. So let's give it as React AWS serverless and hit enter. So it will take some time to install all the dependencies onto your project or onto your current directory. So let's wait for this. I'll be back. So now we got all our dependencies. So let's change the directory to React AWS serverless. So for that, just use the command cd React AWS serverless, or just use tab, enter. So we are into the project now. Now let's do a basic cleanup. Like we will delete the code which we don't want to be on our code base. So let's get into public and index.html. We don't want the title to be React app, we want our title to be React AWS serverless, right? So we change the title. After that, let's get into app.js. We don't want all this. We don't want all this. Let's remove all this. export default app, we will remove this as well. So oh, sorry, just a minute, just a minute. Yeah, let's remove all this, we don't want this. Let's go. Okay, so basically now what we want to do is we want to import two hooks, right? First is use state and second is use effect. So let's import that, use state and use effect from react, from react. Okay, let's do one thing. These are the hooks. Let's first create a basic structure of this. Let's first create a basic structure of our table, and after that we will when we put the data into the database, then we will see like how the use state and use effect gonna work. So let's first create a basic structure of your of our application. Let's go. So for to create our structure, let's create a folder called components in src. After that we will create a users component here, users.jsx, and inside this component we will write our code for our table. So let's import the things which we want to create our table. So import, we want box, first we want component, then we want box, uh, and let's figure out what another field we want from material UI only. So let's get into material UI page, and let's see here what else we want to create our table. So basically we are going to create a table like this only. So let's see what else is there. You can skip this part because I am just looking for the components which we want in our application. So you can fast forward the video. Okay, so let's import some of them. We don't want component actually. We want box, we want typography, we want table, we want table, we want table head, sorry, table head, we want table cell, we want table row, we want table body, we want styled to write our custom css, and finally we want a button to remove the entry of user. And we are importing all this from MUI slash material, right? So we are importing all these components from material UI only. We are using box. Typography means basically we will set that we want everything into h1, h2 or h3. So for that we need a typography. Table we need table head, we need table cell, we need table row, we need table body, we need styled is for to write our custom css, and button is for to remove the entry of the user from our table. So now let's get into it and let's build our first table. So let's go. So to build a table, basically we want a component first. Let's create a component. So inside this component we want a box. Inside a box we want to create a table, I guess. Yeah, inside a box we want to create a table. So let's create a table. Inside the table we need a table head. Inside table head we need table row, I guess. And inside table row we need table cell. So as we have discussed earlier only, we want 5 fields. Let's say id, name, phone number, email. That's it. Id, name, email, contact. That's it. After the table head, now we have to create, or we want to create a table body. So let's create a table body for our table. Okay, so inside table body, let's create a table row. Inside table row we need table cell. So again, what we are gonna do here is id to be 1. Let's create a raw data first here, and then after that we will fetch the data from DynamoDB, and then like we will map the data which is coming from the DynamoDB, and we will use the for loop here to iterate through the array, and we'll get the data which is coming from DynamoDB. So let's copy this, paste it here again. Name should be home, email, something dot gmail.com. Okay, and finally contact number is this. Okay, and finally we want a remove button as well. So for that, table cell, inside this table cell we need to create a button component, button, and here we should write remove. So now let's see it's gonna work or not. So inside this typography we are using a variant as h4. Let's first quickly do that. H4, sorry, h4, and give the name at users. So now let's export this, export default users, sorry, users. So now we are gonna export this component. So let's come into the app.jsx now. Now let's write here some code that we removed earlier. So first of all, import this users.jsx here. So users, from components users, that's great. Now let's go ahead, function app, and after that here we want to return what we want to return. Okay, so now here we're gonna return our component. Okay, so let's do it, users backslash. Okay, so now let's see our application is gonna work or not. And also do one thing, export default, what is this, app. Then in index.js, yeah, we have app here, React DOM client, index.css. Okay, so everything is working fine. So now let's do npm start and let's see how our application is going to look now. I'll be right back. Okay, so as we run our application, oh, that's great. We got three different errors. Let's see how to resolve this error one by one. So the first error which we are getting is that users.jsx, users is not defined. Wait a minute, what we did here is, oh, oh, this is the very silly mistake that we didn't create a function yet. Function users, we didn't create a function and we exported this from here, so that's why the error is coming. And now let's grab all this component here from here and put it inside this function. Now I hope this error will not persist anymore. So let's get into, yeah, that error is gone. Module not found, error can't resolve web vitals. Okay, so we need to install npm web vitals as well. So let's get into your terminal. Let's terminate this and do npm install web vitals, enter. Okay, now let's do npm start, see now is there any error. Okay, okay, so still there is one error, module not found, error can't resolve, nu at material. Okay, I guess we need to add the red here. Guess we need to add at the rate here. Let's add the rate real UI. Now let's see is it working properly or not. Module not found. Can't resolve at the rate MUI slash material in C user. Okay, let me check this. So for this error as well, let's install this module at the rate MUI slash material. Let's grab this from here into our code. Let's terminate this current one, npm install and material UI. Okay, now let's npm start. Hopefully there won't be any error now. Okay, so again this module didn't found. Let's go and install this module as well. So npm start now. Okay, so we are not getting any error as of now. I guess the page is reloaded successfully and we are not getting any error. But style is defined but never used. Okay, now we need to like style our table. So I'm not gonna write it by my own. Obviously, I'm giving this task to ChatGPT. I'm gonna write a code from ChatGPT for this. So I'll be back. Just a minute. Okay, so we took the code from ChatGPT now. So what we did here is we have created a constant called component and we are using styled to write our custom CSS. So this box is getting as a parameter to this styled function, and what we are doing here is we are setting width of this box to be 80%, margin is to be 15 pixels, margin bottom to be 20 pixels, and I don't know whatsoever, right? So because this is not a designing class, I don't know how to write a good CSS, so that's why I'm not gonna tell you like how to write this. So now let's see our application is looking. uh, we are not getting any error, then why we are not able to see our table? Let's see what's the issue with this. Running multiple instances may cause problem multiple. Let me check our code base once again. Okay, we didn't use the return statement here, so we have to return this whole component. So take this component, cut it, and do a paste here. Now hopefully our application beautiful. See, we are getting our table. So in this way we have created the front end of our application. So what we basically did is, let me explain you guys one time like what we did. So basically after creating our React project, we created a components folder inside source folder to create a component. So we created a users component here, then we imported something like some components which we want to which we need to create a table. So we imported this from material UI. So we imported box, typography, table, table head, table row, table cell, table body, styled, and button. So I have already explained that what is the work of all these components. After that, we have use styled function to create our custom CSS, and after that we have created this component. So we return this component. So inside this we have created a box. Inside that box we are creating a table. So inside the table we need a table head and table body. So inside table head we want 5 to 6 fields: ID, name, email, phone, salary, age, and remove entry. That's it. And in table row, in table body we have created a table row once again, and we have entered a raw data. For example, ID to be 1, name to be om, email to be this, and all, right? So, and also we have created a remove button here, and after that we have exported this component from here. And from here we imported this in app.js. Here we import these users from the components folder, and this component we are importing here. After that we are again exporting this app component, and and finally we came to index.js, and here we import our app from app component, and we are showing our app component here. So after doing this we are able to see our uh, table like this. Now as we have created our front end, now let's get deep into the queries of AWS. Let's see how AWS is going to be work for us. We will now create a services for AWS, and we will see how to integrate this React.js with AWS backend. And not even a backend, actually we are creating a serverless application, so we don't have any server to respond with. Okay, so let's get into AWS and let's create a services of AWS now. So I'll see you in the section of AWS. So now let's create our S3 bucket so that we can take all the code of React and can deploy that code onto our S3 bucket. So as this is going to be our deployment bucket, so let's create an bucket. First log into your AWS console, search here S3, and then click on create bucket. So it will take some time to load. Okay, so now let's create a bucket. Give this bucket a name, but make sure that the bucket name should be unique for this region. So let's give it a name as React AWS Serverless. Okay, and one thing you have to remember that you have to uncheck this block all public access, because we are going to send the request from our browser. So anyone can use our bucket, as this is a deployment bucket. So our main index.html file will present in this bucket. So that's why we have to uncheck this block all public access from here, right? And finally create a bucket. Okay, just a minute. Create a bucket. So once the bucket is being created, I'll get back to you. So now we have our bucket here. So let's click here. One thing we have to ensure that go inside the properties, and this static website hosting will be disabled for your bucket. So edit this setting and enable this, so that we can host our website on this AWS bucket, right? Host a static website, and our entry will be index.html. Save changes. That's fine. Okay, now let's go inside the permissions, and we will give some bucket policies so that we can put our object into this bucket, we can delete object from this bucket, and we can read object from this bucket. So let's click on edit, add on new statement, search here for the service. So we want S3, we want put object here. Okay, we want put object ACL, we want delete object, um, get object, and least bucket. Okay, that's it. So these are the actions which we want for our this bucket. So we want to put object, we want to delete object, we want to get object, and we want to least bucket. Okay, so now let's add a resource to this bucket. So resource type should be object, and replace the bucket name from here. So this is your bucket name, take your bucket name here, put enter, and delete this object name and put star here. Okay, so add this resource. Once this resource is added, add one another resource for the S3 service only, but this time the resource type would be bucket. Okay, and the bucket name is this, and add the resource. Now do one thing in this principle, remove this curly braces and add star to this. Okay, now let's do save changes here. Okay, so we get the pop-up here that successfully edited bucket policy. So let's close this pop-up, and now if you come inside the properties tab, in the bottom of this page you will see this bucket website endpoint. So if you now click on this bucket website endpoint link, you will get to see the 404 page, because we didn't added our React files as of now. Let's see, it's loading. See, here we got a 404 error that not found, because we didn't added our HTML or a React code as of now onto our bucket. So let's do it. But for that, what you have to do is go inside your uh, editor and terminate this job, and do one thing, npm run build. You have to run build for this. You have to create a build for this. So once this build is created, now inside this build folder you have the compressed version of this application. So you have to put this build folder onto your S3 bucket, not exactly the build folder, but the folders which are present, or the files which are present inside this build folder. You have to copy that file and put on your S3 bucket. So let's do that. Let's do that. Come to your object. So you can do it manually as well, or you can also use the AWS CLI for this. If you want the AWS CLI option, just go on ChatGPT and search like how to use AWS CLI to upload the objects, right? So we are going to do here manually. So now you can also drag and drop the files and folders you want to upload here. So I'm doing this, so just for a minute I'm pausing this video. So once you added all your files and folders inside this bucket, now you have to click on upload. So it will take some time, so I am pausing this video. Now these files are successfully uploaded inside our S3 bucket. So now close this window, not window, that page only. After that, now come inside the properties, and now let's see our this link is working or not. So now you can see that this our table is coming from the URL which we just created. So this front end is coming from the bucket only, right? So whatever files we have uploaded into this bucket, so that is working now. So now let's create an API gateway, because so that we can hit a request to the Lambda function. So as of now, what we have created is, we are done with our client side work, and also we are created our S3 bucket. Now let's create API gateway so that our API gateway can send request to our Lambda function. So to do so, go inside your AWS console, search your API gateway. So let's create a gateway for this. So now let's create an API gateway. So go inside the AWS console and search for API gateway. So now after that you will land on this page. Now click on create API. Now we want to create a REST API, but see, there are two type of REST APIs, this and second one is private. So what this private one is saying, create a REST API that is only accessible from within a VPC, but we don't want to create a private REST API, we want to create a public REST API. So let's click on build. This will be our new API, so click on new API. Give API name, we are giving it serverless API React. API endpoint type should be regional and click on create API. Now once the API is created, you have to click on create method. We have to create a method for our API. So we want a get method. Why we want a get method? Because we want to fetch the data from database. We want to fetch the data which is coming from DynamoDB. That's why we want a get method. So click on create method. After that, method type should be get, and we want to integrate it with Lambda function because we are sending a request to Lambda function, and from Lambda function we are getting the data. So that's why our integration type will be Lambda function, but we don't have Lambda function as of now. So for a time being, just click on mock and create this method. Okay, now this method is created. Now what this diagram is showing, let me explain you that what this diagram is showing. So this is the client, the, and this particular area is showing is doing the work of API gateway. So the request will come from client, it will go through the integration request type. In our case this is the mock, and after that it will go to the DynamoDB, and same for the response as well. So now what we have to do is just a minute. Yes, now just do one thing, deploy this API, so, which we have created just now. We have to deploy this API, so click on deploy API. We don't have any stage now, so just a minute. Okay, so click on now new stage. Stage name should be dev, let's say. Description also should be dev, and click on deploy. Now once you click on deploy the API, you will get on this page. So now this invoke URL is the URL for your backend. So from front end, this is the URL of front end. Let me show you. This is the, just a minute, this is URL of your front end. So what we have to do is, if we want to fetch the data, then we have to send the request to this URL. We have to send the request to this URL. This URL is of backend. So now let's do one thing. Now instead of a mock, let's create a Lambda function now. So to create a Lambda function, let me do one thing. Let me copy this URL and paste it somewhere else. So let's say I'm pasting this URL here. We will be in a console, then search for Lambda in a console. Now let's create a Lambda function for our application. So click on create function. We want to use a blueprint. We don't want to build this function from scratch, so we are using a blueprint. Now we want a hello world function as an example, as a starter AWS Lambda function. So let's give a function some name. So let's say we are giving a name as serverless API. Okay, so we are giving the name serverless API, and click on create a new role from AWS policy template and give a role name as my new role, let's say my new role. Okay, my new role, and just click on create function. So now the function is created. This is the name of our function, and here below you will see the code which is already written for us. So this is basically this is the code which is coming from the blueprint. So now what we have to do is just test this code. So to test this code, click on test here, create a new event, give it an event name as new event, hello world, and just test. Click on test. Okay, so executing functions succeed. So there is no error in this code, and we will see here, see the response is value 1. So now you can also do something like this. Let's say if you remove all this, and if you do console.log, and AWS is amazing. Okay, now to run this code, first you have to deploy this code, because you change the function. So if you are changing the code which is written inside the function, you have to redeploy the function again and again. So let's deploy this function. Okay, this function got deployed successfully. Now test this function out. Now let's see, we will get an output as AWS is amazing. Okay, so we can see here as information is AWS is amazing. So if we see the problem, there is no problem have been detected in the workspace, and we got our output. So now what we have to do is, let's connect this lambda function with our API gateway, so that the request will flow from API gateway to the lambda function. So to do so, what we have to do is, again get back to the API gateway page, click here on resources, and from here you can see, uh, just a minute. Okay, so when you click on get here, you will be on this page. Now click on integration request, and we want to change the integration request as lambda, not to be a mock integration. So click on this, and here you have to edit. See, here is the integration type as mock, and we want to change this integration type of mock to lambda function. So to do so, click on edit here, click on lambda function, and see, now once again, wherever your bucket is present in this console, you have to keep your lambda function there only. So if your lambda function is in EU North 1, uh, copy the name of your lambda function, paste it here. Okay, so it's coming. Now you don't need to add execution role and all, and just click on save. So once you click on save, successfully updated. Now we have changed the integration type as lambda integration. So now let's see how to do. So now we want to fetch the data from the database. So before that, we have to add data into DynamoDB. But for now, we are not going to perform CRUD operations. We are not going to write a code for the CRUD operations. But for a time being, what we are going to do is, we are hard coding the data. So to do so, go to the AWS console, search for DynamoDB, then click on create table. Now give a name to the table. So let's say we are giving the name as user table 1. Okay, so partition key is basically as the primary key. So in our case, the partition key or the primary key would be ID, which we are passing. So, and that will be string. Sort key is kind of a secondary key, and it's optional here, so you don't have to give the sort key. So let's go ahead and click on create table. That's it. Once the table is created, now we can add data manually into this table. So it's in a creating status. uh, Wait until the status of this user table 1 is active. Okay, so once now this user table 1 is active, click on this, Now here you can click on explore table items, so that on clicking on this particular option we can see what is present in our table, or we can add something from this in our table. So now scroll down, click on create item. Now we are hard coding the data, so add partition key as 1, and it will be string. Okay, so now add new attribute, and that will be a string only. Attribute name is name, the value is om, let's say. Now click on again new attribute, and what we are going to add, let's see here. We want to add, see, we added id, we added name. Now we have to add email, phone, then salary. Okay, so now click on email, so it will be string, attribute name is email, and the value should be omkaram at gmail.com, let's say. Then we have to add a phone number, so it will be a number, contact 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Okay, and what else we have? We have salary and age again. Okay, so add new attribute, salary will be number, salary, we are adding here 451111. Okay, let's do one thing, 200. Okay, and then age, and age is 21. Now click on create item. Once you click on create item, a new entry of the data is get into our database, right? So see, this is the id, this is the contact number, this is email, age, name, and salary. Okay, just a minute, I guess I mistyped something. Okay, that's it. Now we will, what we have to do now is, we want to create a function in a like we want to write a code in lambda function, so that our lambda function is going to hit a request into DynamoDB, and from DynamoDB that function will get the data which is present inside of the DynamoDB. So let's see how the code in the DynamoDB, the code in the AWS lambda will looks like. So now inside our lambda function we have to write this code. So what this code is exactly saying, that we have to import the DynamoDB client and scan command with from AWS SDK. What is the work of DynamoDB client is, it will help us to communicate with DynamoDB, and scan command will extract all the data from the database from the DynamoDB and will give to us, right? Now what this const client is equal to new DynamoDB client is doing, it is creating a new client object which will help us to take a request from DynamoDB, right? After that, what this saying is, const params table name, we want to extract the data from this table name, user table 1. See, we have created this table name, table here, user table 1. So we have using this table name here. After that we want to list all the items. So here is the main logic of the code. So what here is, what we are doing here is, we are using list items as a function, and as this is a asynchronous function, so we will use the word async here, and we want to wrap it inside the try and catch block. So inside the try block, what we are doing is, we are taking the data. So the client will send a new, this client, this object client will help us to get the data from DynamoDB table, right? Means DynamoDB table will send the data, and this will help us to do so, right? And we will return the data here, and if we got any error, then we will catch this error here, right? Now this is the main function of lambda function. Like this is the like boilerplate of lambda function, we can say. So inside this, what we are doing here is, now we are taking the data which is coming from this function list items. So once this function will call invoke, we will get all the data inside this data, and we are returning the status code as 200, and we are taking all the data as an object inside the body, and we are taking that as a JSON format, in a JSON format, right? And if we got any error, then we are catching that error and returning the status code as 500, that something is wrong with your code, right? Now if we test this code, we will get our output. See, just a minute. See, as we test our code, we get our output here. And if in case you didn't get your output, then you will get an error message that access denied. So for that, what you have to do is, you have to go to the console again and click on IAM. Go inside the IAM, and inside the IAM click on roles. Here you will see the role which we have created earlier, so click on that and attach the policy as Amazon DynamoDB full access to that particular role. After that, you will get the access to use this code, right? And once you will test this code, you will get all the data. See, this data is coming from DynamoDB database. Now what we have to do is, we want to hit the request to our API gateway, so that our API gateway can send that request forward to Lambda function, and our Lambda function can get this data to us. So for that, let's get into API gateway. Here inside stages, we have our backend API. So this is our backend invocation API. So copy this API, and now we have to write our code inside our code editor. So now first of all, what to do is, we have to import, just a minute, we have to import here use state from React, and use effect from React. Okay, after that, we also want to import Axios. We are also going to import Axios Axios from I guess from React only. No, we are going to import this from Axios only. Okay, so now let's start writing the code inside this users component. Okay, so what we have to do is, let's create a const users, set users, okay, is equal to use state. We are using use state hook here, and initially the value is going to be an empty array. So now initial value is nothing here. So you set users will be helpful for us to change the set of users, right? So now what we are going to do here is const API. Okay, let me do it capital. API URI equals to the URI which we copied from our API gateway. So paste that URI here, and after that, what we have to do is, we are going to use effect, and to use effect, we are using the fat arrow function here, and we are going to take const get data is equal to, and this is an async function, so async operation. So now let's create here const response is equal to await axios dot get API underscore URI. Okay, that's it. Now set users to be, when the user state will update, what we have to do is, when we get data from our backend, we want to parse it into JSON. So response dot data dot inside body, we are getting all the response. Okay, so this is it. uh, this is our code, so that we will get the data from backend. Now let's see how it's work. So now we no longer wanted to use the hard coded data. So whatever data we get inside this users array, what we are going to do here now is we will loop this users array and will generate the data dynamically. So let's do it. So we have to wrap this table row inside the map function. So to do so, we have to write this code: user dot users dot map, and we will create a user. There will be a callback. Okay, so now we will wrap the complete table row inside this. Okay, wrapped complete. Now instead of using this 1 to 1 ohm here, what we can do is user dot, what was here previously, user dot name. So to do so, we will write it something as user dot name. Here we will do same user dot email, user dot email, user dot contact, user dot salary, and finally user dot age. Now here what we are going to do here is we have to, as we have set the partition key as 1, what we have to do here is in this cell we are going to do user dot id. And also one thing what we have to do here is inside this table row we have to mention a key. Okay, we have to mention a key on the basis of which all the data is going to sort, or on the basis of which we will get the data. So the key here will be user.id only, because this is our partition key. So that's why we are using user.id here. So let's see now if this code works or not. Let's do npm start here, and let's see if we get our desired output or not. Cannot find module Axios. Okay, let's terminate this and do npm install Axios. Enter. Now let's npm start it again. Export Axios, imported as Axios was not found in Axios. I don't know what this error wants to tell us. Let me check my code first. We are using the function user const user set user use effect const get data. Okay, this get data function is not called anywhere. Wait a minute, let's call get data here. Now let's see if our code works or not. Let's refresh this. Export Axios, imported as Axios. Oh, okay. Just a minute. Let's move this. I guess it will work. Okay, we are getting uncaught error once again. Anxious error. Let's inspect this and see what error. Okay, we are getting the course error. So basically what course means, we are running our front end on a different server and back end on a different server. So I guess we need to enable the course from here. So if we go inside our API gateway and if we go on resources, let's enable course here. Access control for get method. Let's save this. Okay, successfully enable course. Now I hope we will get our desired output. Let's refresh this page. Yes, and the error is gone. But once again we are getting the course error. I guess we let me enable course once again. Save. I think we need to deploy the API again. Dev deploy. Okay, active for dev now. Now let's see if we get the same error again. Yeah, we got the same error again. What does this error is saying? Uncaught in promise. On number. Let me do one thing. Let's terminate this for one time and let's check where is the issue with. I guess we are sending this data directly and it's coming in something. Let's do one thing. Let's run this code once again. npm start. We will see what actually is happening here. Users.map is not a function. It is saying that users.map is not a function. How is it possible? And it is saying user.map is not a function. Let's do one thing. What if we do like this? Now it's compiled successfully. Let's insert the browser. It's saying user.map is not a function again. Let's terminate this and npm start once again. Now we are not getting any error. Line number 67, I'm getting an error. Dot item. See, we are not getting error now, which means that the response which is coming inside the body is coming in items. Our code was completely right till this, but after that when I prompted to ChatGPT, the ChatGPT is telling that DynamoDB SDK v3 returns nested object like this caused the React error, and we were encountering this error from a long time. So to fix this error, what we have to do here is we want to convert DynamoDB format to usable format. Till this line we was completely right, no doubt, but after that we need to convert DynamoDB format to usable format. So for that, when you do these kind of changes, like item.id.s, like inside item object there is id, and now this dot s, then we will get the id, will get name, email, phone, salary, age. So when I do changes this in my code, now there is no error. Now it's completely working, no error, and all the data we are fetching from DynamoDB. So this is it. This is how we can create a serverless application using React and AWS. So that's it from my side. And if you want a brief about this, what we did was we wrote a code in React just for our front end. After that, we created a API gateway, sorry, S3, and we enable the public deployment there. So we create a build of our application, front end application, and we deployed that front end application on S3. After that, we created an API gateway so that a request can go through the API gateway to Lambda function, and then Lambda function will trigger, and after that the Lambda function will get the data from DynamoDB, right? So after creating an API gateway, we created a Lambda function. We saw how to write code inside Lambda function, and after that we hard code the data inside DynamoDB, and then we send a request from our front end to back end. But during that we encounter an error called CORS, so we enable CORS from API gateway. After that we redeploy that API, and after doing all this mess, we are now finally ended up with our project, and we are getting our data successfully. So that is it. That is it from my side. I'm posting, like, I'm pushing all this code on GitHub, so if you want the code, you can check out my GitHub. uh, I'm putting my GitHub link in the caption below. Thank you.